2023. Exactly 1 month from now, the Mysterious Earth Conference will be happening in St. Dan's, Lynham St. Dan's in Blackpool, in Lancashire, England. And if you're not there at the event, you're missing out on a whole. And the lineup is absolutely superb. I was looking again last night. And it's also a very different conference. It's covers things that are far beyond just like ancient structures and so on. And I want to talk about this in the video. If you're in the north of England and you follow my work, and even if you're not interested in this stuff, you really need to come for this conference. Not only are you going to get a movie and you're going to get excellent speakers, but you're going to have me for one day entertaining you all during the day. And it's tremendous value, and it's an easy place to get to. So I really think you should all be there. It'll be, it'll be amazing. And also I look forward to you guys. I miss you. I do. When I'm away in Ireland and I come back to England, I realize how much I miss all you guys. So, come along. Get the love on, get the fun on, get the learning on, and enjoy yourself in a lovely part of England. Now, why does the ancient past matter? And the reason I'm making this video today is I don't want to talk about the things that are currently in the news, because the world is just insane at the moment, and it's unhinged. So today's video will be a bit more of like a kind of, think of a Vaughn in front of the camera. Now, excuse me, periodically I was drinking coffee. Now, when I was a teenager, I grew up in the Ballymun Flats on the north side of Dublin. It's basically a slum, a high-rise slum, what Americans call the projects. And I didn't live on the top of the tall towers, but I had friends who did, and I used to go out and look out, and you could see past Dublin Airport into the countryside. And one of the things you could see from the top of my friend's parents' apartment or flat was the hill of Tara. And it just used to constantly keep appealing to me. Why, and I didn't really know. I knew, we knew about Tara. There was actually a brand of chocolates in Ireland at the time called Tara. I remember that. And there was like shops around Dublin called Tara Dry Cleaners or Tara this, Tara that. And so when I got my first proper bicycle, a decent bicycle, I used to start looking for old stuff, because I didn't know anything. There was not, everything that I knew was built in the 60s. So one day near Dublin Airport, I discovered what I thought was a round tower. And every time I fly into Dublin Airport, I nearly either see it coming in or going out. It's near Dunshaughlin, on the County Meath border. And it was just amazed me. It was in the middle of a barley field. And, walking towards to see it, when I was going into the field, to see pheasants shooting up out of the corn in the field. It was amazing. Like, this is someone who grew up in an inner city, so basically, in an urban area. And I thought that the tower was a round tower. It wasn't. It was part of an old mill from the Renaissance period. Just that the mill part on top where the wheel would be gone. But it was enough to get me interested. And then I used to go to places on the train like Lusk and see the round tower there in the churchyard, and that was a real thing. And immediately I was struck that this thing is much older. And then I started to explore other things, and there was day trips you could take, and places like, I got to the Hill of Tara and Newgrange and Nowt. And the first time I visited Carrowkeel in Sligo, I thought I was in a different reality. I will never forget the sense of ancientness that hung over me. Now, I didn't know anything about the official history of this stuff, as I had come with a blank slate. And literally all I knew about the round towers was the picture on the illustration of a round tower used to be on the Folan's school books. Folan's were an educational publisher in Ireland. They're still going. They used to make, exercise books, science books, copybooks. And on the cover was always a round tower. And it was the round tower at Glendalough. And that one I really got to see when that's when the book really bit. Now, because I didn't have any kind of academic or book insight into these things, my imagination ran wild, because I was literally wondering what they were. And I used to think, well, maybe the Druids were here. And then, later on I discovered that these things, the stone circles and stuff, were built thousands of years before the Druids and the Celts ever existed. But that, and then I used to think about witches and all kinds of things to do with these that was not necessarily true. But then a TV series called Children of the Stones came on. This is what Greg Moffat's talk will be about at Mysterious Earth. How, the pop culture did actually affect my relationship with these things more so than book academic stuff. And I'll tell, or archaeological text. And that's a good thing, because I'll tell you why. The archaeologists don't know any more than any of us know about them. The very ancient sites truly are an ancient mystery. Therefore, you can pour whatever imaginings you want into them. So for like H.P. Lovecraft, he poured his mythos into the one on Sentinel Hill in, the Dunwich Horror. And so on. And also the one in the basement of the Delaporte mansion in The Rats Within the Wall. And then the way he brought in the mysterious ancient Greek monuments in the Moon Bog in Ireland that raised from the bog. And sure enough, there's a place not too far from here called the Neil, where there's a Greek temple built on top of a Neolithic chamber. It's a folly, but it's almost like he saw it, but it's also a very mysterious place, the Neil. And then I would go up to Massey's mansion up in the Wicklow Mountains and spend time there. And there was some, ancient sites there as well as not so ancient sites. And it soon became apparent to me, by the time I was in my early 20s, that there was something wrong with the historical record. That there was something that didn't make a lot of sense. And I had read the books by Eric von Daniken and all this stuff, and he spoke about how these things were all over the world, and they didn't really tie up, and he claimed aliens, but I never bought that, but I still don't buy it. But I still found the anomalies I found the anomalies that he pointed out far more interesting than the conclusions he came to. And then I went, when I was in America and Europe and saw ancient sites in other places, it only strengthened my resolve that there's another side to humanity. There's this side, like comparing it to this, right? There's this side here that is like, the vlogs I do on, my Thomas Sheridan and Thomas Sheridan 2 channels, right? The sort of like the real world stuff, dealing with the real world. And then we're on here, BR313, there's the other world. The mystical world, the Fortean world, the transcendental world, the world beyond, the world that begins, the reality that begins, the matrix that begins, the field that begins, the experience that begins beyond the scientific method. And it was this investigation of ancient mysteries that made me realize the present was to be cautioned about. For instance, I'll give you an example. The Rona thing, right? The reason why I was so hesitant about that is because I wanted to know what happened to all the societies that built all these ancient monuments. They just didn't vanish. Yes, we have the story of Atlantis and how it sunk to the waves, but that could have happened for numerous reasons. It could have happened like what Steiner or Edgar Cayce said, where they developed sciences that destroyed them. And these these missing civilizations from the ancient past were telling us about us now. Then I started later on read the books by Robert Duval and other people, Fingerprints of the Gods with Graham Hancock, about how the erosion on the Sphinx made no sense. And John Anthony West later came along. How the erosion on the Sphinx made no sense. And it was much older than they said it was. And they said because that was rainwater erosion. And the last time they had heavy rains in the Sahara was 12,000 years ago. We know this by the geological record. But they kept dating everything to 2500 BC. Everything. And I often was suspicious about this date, 2500 BC. It was almost like they drew a line under antiquity and says anything before this didn't exist, until they were forced to accept it with things like Göbekli Tepe and things like that. And the only reason they accepted that is because it supported the out of Babylon, out of Sumer, out of the Middle East, out of the Holy Land story, because it was in the same general area on the far eastern side of Turkey on the Iraq border near. If that had been found anywhere else, like when Kara Moore, when the Swedish team did the initial carbon dating of a seriously uncorrupted, perfect sample of soil, and came with 12,000 BC, and then the Irish archaeologist told him to go back and redate it. It's the wrong date. But if Kara Moore had been, Cairn 51 had been in the Middle East or close by, they would have said, "Oh, the timeline's been pushed back." And see this, I've seen this all my life, and this cynicism that you develop about ancient antiquities is also the cynicism you develop about the world in general. But it's not a negative thing. Quite the opposite. It's a very empowering thing, because it makes you realize that you are the sum total of all these people who survived these things in the past. And so when I talk about ancient sites, and I know a lot of you know this anyway, but if someone's new to my work, I'm not necessarily talking about archaeology. I'm talking about feelings, sensations, and marveling, wonderment. Because what's in those stones is in the world today. And then there was the other period, and this played a huge part in my paganism, was that the so-called rollover period between paganism and Christianity made no sense to me. Especially in Ireland, where we were explained a lot of this in schools, given to us. They basically said, on a Padraig, St. Patrick, arrived in Ireland, everyone was backward and stupid, and overnight they became great artists and craftsmiths, silversmiths, goldsmiths, and builders. So literally they were living in mud huts. The exact same story that the ancient Britons are given about Julius Caesar arriving in England, in the south of England. You were basically animals, and then these people from the east came along, usual story, never the west, because they don't want you to know about what's in the west, Atlantis, and civilized them. It made no sense. You don't have, when I go to the National Museum of Ireland, and they show all this incredible silver and gold work and then you see the buildings around the country, say these all instantly popped up as soon as the Christians arrived. No way, they already existed. And you had this thing called the Goban Seir and the Gobanu. One is the pagan smith god, and the other one is a Christian saint who built all the ancient wonders of early Christian art. And then I realized it's the same guy. They're just telling us that all this pagan stuff is Christian. And a big part for that was the round towers and the infrastructure around them. Some of these round towers, you couldn't, you stand at the bottom of them and you look up at them, that's something about 80 feet high. Some are over 100 feet high. And they're as straight as a die. You could fire a laser up the side and it wouldn't detect. The stone is perfectly shaped. Now, there's one round tower at Kilmacdonough in County Clare, and it's leaning to one side, And everyone makes a big deal about how it's leaning to one side, but that's not what the big deal should be. The big deal is that it has the same kind of stonework that you get in the Incas in Peru. The same in Egypt and the polygonal wall type stone. Not like that, but of the same level of masonry. And some of it is, it just blows your mind how they built that. The stones are beautifully dressed and curved, and that you couldn't get a razor, a razor blade between the stones. Now, next to it is what they call a Christian church. Well, it is on Temple, and the bottom half of it, and you see this all over Ireland, has this has the polygonal interlocking stonework from the very ancient times, and on top of that is the Christian rubble, I call it, which is just basically stones held together with a Roman cement mixture of lime mortar, oxblood, and a bit of sand off the ground, off the beach, or a bit of muck, it's clay, dirt as the Americans call it. And it made no sense to me that the further you went back in time, the higher the level of proficiency of the builders and their crafts. So I knew right away we were being lied to, but it wasn't. I didn't run around going, "We're being lied to. We're being lied to." I was like, "Oh, I know what you guys are up to. You're presenting us with a false history of the world." And then I went back and started thinking about the Von Daniken things again. See, this is what is so important. A sense of wonderment grows inside you. And then I looked at those Easter Island statues. Now, I knew that they went all the way down to their feet, but we only ever saw photographs of them buried up to about their nipples, right? And and they blew my mind. But then I started to think about that, and I started to think, okay, if those things go all the way down to their feet, and the soil comes up to their chest, where did that soil come from on a tiny island? There wouldn't have been enough vegetation, trees, or anything to accumulate that soil in the 1500 years that they claim those things have been standing. And then I said, well, there's no country nearby. Easter Island is incredibly remote. It's right beside the southern polar area of inaccessibility. Point Nemo's not far away. If you're standing on Easter Island and the International Space Station goes overhead, you're closer to people in space than you are to people across the sea in Chile. That's how remote it is. Or anywhere else in the world. That's how remote it is. So there's no way that soil could have come from somewhere else. So there was two other options to this, that Easter Island was much bigger than it was, they say now, and there's a whole submerged island under the sea, and that makes sense, so on. And then I thought to myself, what could accumulate that soil? Well, the obvious answer was volcanoes, the volcanic ash. Then you find out that the last time they had a volcanic eruption in Easter Island was 150,000 years ago. So there's one or two things going on here. Those statues on Easter Island are at the top of a mountain that was once a larger island and civilization under the sea, or they're older than 150,000 years. And either one is mind-blowing. And they're still finding those Rapa Nui, those Maui statues of the Rapa Nui. Well, the Rapa Nui even said they didn't build them there already. The ancient stones of the Maui stones, there's the statues, they're still finding them on a tiny island. It's a tiny, tiny island. I was standing one day at the end of Sri Lanka, looking out across the Indian Ocean and pondering the colossal distance from the end of Sri Lanka from the southern tip of Sri Lanka all the way to the South Pole, Antarctica. It's a colossal distance. Absolutely colossal. And then it dawned on me, and then I was reading about Sri Lankan myths, regarding Ramasitu and stuff like that. And it dawned on me that this is what's left of Lemuria. In the same way, Ireland, Scotland, parts of England, and parts of France, and Portugal and Spain are what's left of Atlantis. And knowing this stuff fills you with a feeling that you can't begin to imagine. You cannot begin to imagine. You realize that you're a species, a member of a species that is far more older and far more complex. And that's why the likes of Neil puts on his mysterious Earth conference and conferences, and people come to them, is because they know that there's something incredible to be said in all this stuff. And just being around people talking about it, it doesn't matter if they're the recumbent stone scarecrows in Aberdeenshire, or they're the megaliths of Denmark and Gotland and Sweden, or it's the round towers of Ireland, the Maoho statues of Easter Island, the mysterious stone circles and dolmens of America that are definitely the real thing, and all the stuff buried under the jungle in Central and South America still to be found. It doesn't matter. It creates a sense of harmony inside you, that you suddenly feel like you now understand what to be a person is, and what your ancestors are, and how far it goes back, and just how awesome it all is. And the mysteries are anything but frustrating. They're the complete opposite of frustration. They create a sense of marvel and wonderment. They don't create bewilderment, they create wonderment. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. To be around, to go to these events and to be around people who think the same way, to pick up and buy books and read them and take them home about them, makes you understand things all through history. Makes you understand. That's why Neil and I are premiering the Pendle Witch documentary at this event. Because you'd say, well, what's the Pendle Witch has got to do with ancient stone circles? I'll tell you why. Because the Pendle Witches were persecuted because they represented a culture that went back to the Neolithic and Bronze Age stone circle cultures. And that's why they were a reminder to the establishment, just like indigenous people all over the world are a reminder to the establishment of just how ancient we are, and they don't want us knowing this, and how we've survived incredible cataclysms to rebuild again. This is why you had this instant attack upon Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse. They were all, because they don't want to believe there's anything older than the Bible. And that's just how they are. Because why? Because if there's anything older than the Bible, which everything is, most things are in the ancient world, that puts the whole lie out of business. And suddenly, you say, the kind of culture that they have, well, we are Western civilization, we are the leaders of Western, they almost invoke the divine right of kings based on this timeline they've created that's completely false. And they create all kinds of distractions in the alt scene to throw you off in the wrong direction. And there's no hard and fast answers, and that's the power and the beauty of it. There's no hard and fast answers. And like on Hocus Focus, which is on this channel tomorrow night at 8 p.m. They've got another video by the chap who makes the Saturday morning seance videos. This one's fantastic, as they always are. But he also understands living in, I don't know if he's in Derbyshire or Staffordshire, one of those places in England. He understands that outside your front door, there are incredible mysteries, and it's you don't have to. Now, it's great to travel, and it's great to go on to, I love traveling to see these sites, but you don't necessarily have to, because it's all outside our front doors. And that's what I love about his channel, Saturday Morning Seance, is that he's basically saying it's outside your front door, and then proves it with his videos. in many places where we live. Even in America now, we live on the east coast of America, there's megaliths everywhere. Everywhere. And even if they're not megaliths, like Manny Grossman makes videos with that chap in upstate New York. And some could be stone walls, some could be barn solids, but some of them are not. Some of them are definite megaliths. And the mystery is diving in there to see which one is which. Diving in to see which one is which. See, the whole, yeah, like I'm reading, I'm reading a book at the moment. Let me see if I have it here. This was This was recommended by Jason Heppenstall, who's appearing at the Mysterious Earth Conference too, and it's by John Michael Greer, an excellent writer, and I love his website. And in this book, one of the sections he was talking about was like, you ask the average person about like why did Columbus sail to America, and he said because he thought the Earth was flat. That's never been true at all, And there's all these kinds of assumptions put out there about everything like that, about history and everything. And I like the way in the book he talks about the academics, like the academics and their defenders, what we call the debunkers. Now, this doesn't mean that everything the academics say is wrong. This is part of your growth and your education as an alternative researcher. Is you don't assume everything that the authorities say is wrong. A lot of it is right. A lot of it is the truth. But a sizable amount of it is distorted. And the reason why it's distorted is they're not as clever as they think they are, and they can't answer all the questions. So they say things like, well, it's been scientifically proven that this is that, and it never has been scientifically proven. It's just stated. It's stated as a matter of fact. And what I love about the ancient sites is there is no matter of fact. This is why I go into them and I try to read them, and I won't say spiritually, but consciously. Like, how does this place make me feel? And I can tell you, contrary to a lot of these Wiccans and everything, some of these stone ancient sites have a terrible, frightening feeling about them. You often wonder if they created stone circle to stop people from raising up from the dead or something like that, or trapping something. Like that movie, The Borderlands, the Christian church is plug holing on top of an ancient horror that even the ancients had tried to contain with a stone circle. Then you go to other places and they have I'll give you an example of one that has a bad energy, the Rollright stones. The Rollright stone's impressive, it's lovely the way it's set up in the woods there next, it's very handy, but it doesn't have a pleasant energy. And then you find out about the horrible murder of a groundskeeper there, a farm labourer there, and a black magic sacrifice in the 1940s, and by the aristocrats, and you realise it's the Marsden House in Salem's Lot. Evil places attract evil people. And then you go to other places like in the Lake, nearly all the ones in the Lake District in England, and they all leave you with a lovely impression of peacefulness and calm because of the way they're aesthetically set. And I'm not just talking about the big stone circles, also like the smaller ones too. Just 2 or 3 stones together. There's a lovely energy in the ones in the Lake District in England. So they may have served a different other purpose. And so that's the beauty. I think when you take an interest in ancient mysteries, without actually saying to yourself, this is what it is or this is what it isn't, but stay in the world of speculation and pondering, you actually have a kind of a spiritual transformation that serves you well in every other aspect of your life. So, with that, me and Sarah will see you tomorrow night on Beyond Room 313 in this channel for Hocus Focus. And I hope to see as many of you as possible and greet you all with a big smile on my face. In this time next month, I'll put the link to the conference in the comments below, pinned at the top. And when the world is as nuts as it is now, look to the ancestors. So that's what I would say to you right now, starting this weekend. If you're not doing, there's a load of videos on this channel and there's loads of videos everywhere else. Start looking at the ancients, because what the ancients had to say, they're still saying it.